Hey guys, Mark from Tribeca Beverage. Today I want to share with you the phone language I use to go from 0 customers to a couple of thousand customers in about 2 to 3 years. I want to break down my thought process and strategies on how I approach a sales call so you can use these strategies yourself to get you as many customers over the phone as possible. So look guys, if you're serious about mastering your skills over the phone, stick around to the very end of the video so you can take advantage of all the techniques I'll be going over and help maximize the amount of customers you can get over the phone. Okay, to dive deeper into the sales approach and sales language itself, I want to make very clear to whoever's listening to this video is described for people who are doing sales calls or cold calls to a large customer base. I want to stress that. If it is a small customer base, hypothetically, there's a limited number of prospects that are possibly available in your market, maybe 100, maybe a couple hundred. This is probably not the technique. This language is designed for realtors, insurance agents, a lot of direct to consumers type sales calls. If you're a business to business call, this may not be the video for you. If you're a business to business call, but you have a lot of different prospects and you can target every type of small business, this might be a good video for you. It really kind of just depends on the amount of prospects. All right, look guys, as you're diving into phone calls, cold calls, sales calls, whatever you want to call them, the one thing you'll obviously need is this guy. I don't know if you guys have seen something like this before, but this is what they call a desk phone. They don't really sell them many places, but they do exist and they're very convenient. You leave them on speakerphone, you dial the numbers, you don't have to worry about misclicking the wrong number because the numbers are big and bulgy and very convenient. Definitely recommend a desk phone. If not, they have a bunch of online platforms and things of that nature. The language I'm recommending, the reason it's not a good fit for business to business limited prospect type sales calls is because we're really kind of attempting to craft a one size fits all. And if you have a limited number of prospects, it's probably in your best interest to do as much research as possible prior to leading into the phone call. Whereas in a situation where, like again, you're a realtor insurance agent and the sky is the limit with the amount of prospects that you can call, you really want to maximize the amount of people that you reach out to, and it's almost a little bit of a quantity versus a quality. So just to clarify, the goal of this video is to create the highest likelihood of success over the phone with whatever your sales goal is. So that might mean on occasion your method might discourage one or two or a few people. That doesn't mean you still shouldn't use that language or method when you approach a sales call. If you end up closing a ton of people with language that's working, it's language that you might want to end up keeping, even though there might be a few people that were discouraged by the language or techniques that you used. Okay guys, a couple things that I want to really dive into, and this is what not to do when you start a sales call or cold call. It might seem like common sense to do, and trust me when I say this, do not do this. You are setting yourself up for disaster. The first and probably most obvious thing is asking if this is a good time. Don't ever ask that. Think about that question just for a second. When you're saying, is this a good time? Well, is this a good time for what? Is this a good time to be solicited for an idea that you weren't aware of that you may or may not like? No? Okay, when is the best time to follow up with you? To be solicited for an idea that you may or may not like? Well, my soliciting hours are between 4 to 6 p.m. tonight, so call me then, and that's when I accept strange phone calls. That doesn't ever exist. Do not ask if this is a good time. How could this ever be a good time to receive a solicitation from a stranger? At what point do you think people actually want that? So we throw away with that question completely because it just doesn't really matter. It's not a good time. We know it's not a good time. It's never a good time to receive solicitations. People aren't looking for solicitations. The second question that I hear people ask all the time, and I just cringe whenever I hear it, is how's your day going? How's it going? You know, just a formal kind of hello, you know, how are you doing today? Guys, seriously, don't ever ask that. It's silly, it's stupid, it's crazy to think, and it's not even authentic at all. Are you really sitting when you call 1,000 people or 100 people or 50 people that day, really concerned about how their day is? And do you think the prospect or whoever you're calling is also concerned that you know how their day is? And likewise, if they follow up with that, how are you? It's probably not that authentic because again, you guys are strangers, you don't know each other. I know this might seem like polite common practice between this question and the other question. Just don't use it, don't lead in with that, stay away from that. At the end of the day, when it comes to making these cold calls, we really initially in the first couple words, first couple sentences, really want to stay away from small talk in general. If you have a ton of information, again, not that I want to dive too much into this, but if it's a B2B sale with limited prospects, you might have a totally different strategy. But if you have very limited information, just their name, and maybe they might be a warm lead who's possibly interested in something, unless they give you an excited, real cool response, which again, often you really shouldn't even give them the opportunity to. I can't imagine the prospect caring. I'm a business owner myself, so I've received many calls. I don't ever understand why strangers ask me how my day is going or if this is a good time to talk. But right off the bat, let's stay away from these two easy, obvious questions that some people might think are being polite, but really ultimately it's kind of hurting them. Okay guys, let's get to what's important. Let's talk about an example or what we should do or what we should start the conversation with whenever you're making your initial cold call or sales call. What you really want to lead in with, and it's almost similar to how I did the introduction for this video, is start with your name and often the introduction of your company or the name of your company. Hi, this is Mark from Tribeca Beverage. Hi, this is Mark from Joe Schmo's Insurance Agency. Hi, this is Mark from blank blank real estate company. Quick, smooth, effective. We don't really want to spend too much time on our name and the name of the company. Again, we're calling a stranger. What can they really do with that information? Not too much. Really, you got to understand when a stranger is receiving a phone call from a number they don't recognize, they're probably thinking to themselves, should I not pick up? I may or may not. And at this point, consumers might be so strange whenever they look at phone calls, they might even be thinking this might be a sales call. Should I or should I not pick up? So as soon as you introduce your name and the company you're from, a little bit in their mind, and again, this is why it's really important to come off as confident as possible, but a little bit in their mind, they're probably going to start to pick up pretty quickly that this is a sales call, which it is. And as a result, you really want to be quick with your name and the name of the company so you can move on to your value add as quickly as possible. And you really want to set the tone for a little bit, almost as if you're following up with them, almost as if you had a little bit of a relationship with them, so they just feel more comfortable over the phone. You got to understand, the reason why somebody doesn't want to pick up a sales call is often the inconvenience or feelings that they have already set for themselves once they acknowledge it is a sales call. And what I mean by that is as soon as they see the number they don't recognize and pick up and identify it's a sales call, they're probably thinking to themselves, I don't want to have to spend my time dealing with somebody that I'm just going to get over the phone. If they still choose to pick up, it could mean a number of things. If a consumer picks up your call, right, and they see that they don't identify the number or the caller ID is something that they don't recognize, in the back of their mind, they're probably still thinking that this might be a sales call. Now, maybe 10 years ago, that was a little bit different, right? As cell phones were a little bit newer, not so much, but still even so. And 10 years even from now, there's probably going to be more technology letting somebody know that the call coming in is a sales call. So it's important that when they do pick up your phone call, you identify your name and your introduction as quick as possible. And a quick introduction is really all that needs to be done. They're already concerned it's a sales call. The bigger the introduction it is, the more of a standard that you're going to set for a sales call. And as a result, the quicker they are going to try to hop off the phone, because the way consumers have their minds trained today, and maybe for good reason, maybe for not, but when they receive a sales call, they instantly shy away. They do not want to deal with it. They do not want to deal with the idea of rejecting somebody, and they do not want to deal with having their time wasted. So the quicker the introduction, the more time you have to get into your value add, and the less time they have to realize that you're about to attempt to sell them something, which unfortunately is an uncomfortable feeling for them. All right, guys, when it comes to the value add after the introductions, this is kind of the meat and potatoes of it. This is the most important thing. This is what we want to get right. We don't want to screw this up. Appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. So what we want to do with the value add is consolidate it as much as possible. We want to take a sentence or two out of a big concept and share the most appealing way that you can add value. Picking your value add, a couple things to remember. We want to lead with a sales call that will provide the most amount of value for the most amount of people that you call. So following that logic, you need to pick something that the consumer most likely needs and doesn't have and is able to differentiate you from your competitor. As an example of this, if you're an insurance agent, you could lead into a phone call with this type of value add. Hey, this is Mark from Tribeca Beverage Insurance Company, and I'm reaching out because we can save you a ton of money on your insurance compared to what you pay for it through work. This is an easy example of a way to differentiate yourself from your competitors in a way that you're spending less money, or you would have them spend less money on your product than what they're paying for currently. Example of an easy way to differentiate yourself from the competitor, because you'll be saving them money, so the consumer hopefully would be excited and willing to entertain a meeting or possibly purchase from you. All right, guys, so if your goal is to get a sale over the phone, understand that that obviously can be a little bit more difficult than asking someone to meet with in person. And most likely, your value add will probably lead into a longer conversation before they say yes. But when going down that road and asking those hard questions, we really want to start, and I recommend, with the smallest commitment possible and often your least expensive product. This should give the consumer the easiest transition from not being a customer to becoming a customer. So for example, within our service in particular, we sell the minimum order and we pitch it almost all the entire time, even when customers are asking about how much more bottles would be. We still end up encouraging them to take less. And we say this because the reality is, if they don't like it for some crazy reason, this gives them the least amount of buyer's remorse and should hopefully give them the most peace of mind. And if they do like it, we've at this point have a relationship with, and we can always transition to the upsell. Now, if they do say yes, right, the sale isn't over, because you got to understand this is a phone transaction which you've never met them. You really have to convince them at that point to give them your payment information, which should be an easy conversation of say, hey, are you using a debit or credit card? But very often, and people subtly will not want to share that, and sometimes blatantly say, I don't feel comfortable sharing that. After the first yes, and before you get to that standpoint, I always like to work with the customer and let them know how the transaction is going to happen, even if they're not even asking, because I'm concerned about that second objection down the road to say, hey, I don't know you, I don't trust you. It totally makes sense how you don't know us or don't trust us. Basically, it's important to make sure that the customer itself is fully aware of how the entire transaction works, to protect themselves as much as possible, or at least not protect themselves, but rather feel protected throughout the whole process. I often end up giving a lot of customers who I notice are hesitant my cell phone number, and I volunteered even before they ask. And I do that because between the time that they say yes and give me the payment information and the time the transaction occurs, I want them to have as much peace of mind. I let them know the receipt is coming even though they're not asking, and I'm pretty much walking them through each step of the transaction, even though they've given me a full, definitely, I'm going to move forward type of attitude, because I am prepared and I know. And at one point they might think to themselves, hey, I don't know you. Why am I giving you my credit card information? All right, guys, the last piece of the phone call, obviously, as you can imagine, is the closing. This is where you ask the hard question, whether they want to buy, meet in person, depending on what your goal is. It's crucial that we execute this well and we make sure they're comfortable, to get obviously the best shot of making sure that you achieve whatever goal you're trying to achieve. So when it comes to doing the closing right, depending on what your goal is, probably going to dictate what your language is going to be. So for example, let's say hypothetically you were trying to get a meeting. I typically like to lead in, and obviously every case is different, but I typically like to lead in with a reason why you're going to be in their area. So hypothetically, you might say, well, I'm going to be in your area Tuesdays and Thursdays meeting with other people around there. And it's really important that you give them the flexibility to let them know that they are going to be in your area, because they want to have the knowledge knowing that if they do cancel, it's not like they inconvenienced you personally, because ultimately they don't want that level of guilt or responsibility or commitment to you. So giving them the flexibility of an out is so crucial for them to accept the meeting initially. So again, when you're asking them to meet on a certain day of the week, I typically lead in and say, hey, give them a few days. Hey, I'm going to be in your area Tuesday and Thursday. And what that does for the consumer or prospect is it just allows them to, A, not pick a day, because that'll be often difficult if this is something that they're kind of only interested in. And on top of not having to pick a day, you let them know that you're going to be in there anyway. So, hey, look, if it doesn't work out, and I'll usually say this on the phone, it's no stress. Just let me know. I'm going to send you an email invitation. That way, if you need to cancel, it's no big deal. You can just walk away. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening. Really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. And if you have any comments, good, bad, feedback, thoughts, please don't hesitate to share them. I'd love to hear everything you guys have.